we're so proud to have with us Loai Ahmed, who's a writer, a host, and so much more. Thank you for being in Israel.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So tell us everything.
Well, where do we start?
Where are you from?
Well, I am from Yemen. I grew up in Sana'a, which is the capital city of Yemen. And I grew up in this very open-minded, democratic family. Actually, my mom is a feminist. So my mom is the only person I knew in Yemen growing up who did not wear the hijab. So every time I would be in school, my classmates would be like, your family is going to hell, your mom is going to hell. I'm like, what is wrong with you, you know? So I think that was one of the first things that made me kind of like start this critical thinking of the society I'm living in. Because in class, in school, in mosques, I internalized and learned homophobia, anti-Semitism, misogyny. But my mom was kind of like that beaming light that every time my teacher would say something erotic and crazy, I'd go to my mom like, Mom, is this true? And then she'd be like, no, forget them. So like I would go to her, I'm like, is it true, Mom, that you're going to go to hell for not wearing the scarf like the teacher said? She's like, no, honey, they are the ones going to hell.
Oh, she sounds awesome.
Oh, she is awesome. So she helped me kind of like have this critical thinking. So 2014, I was invited by the Swedish Olof Palme Center, which is a government center, to go to Sweden and talk about human rights as a youth who participated in the revolution. And I could speak English when I was from the time that I was in Yemen. So they wanted someone who could speak English and speak about these issues. So right before going to Sweden, I sat in my room and I thought, Loai, you have to face it. You're gay and you want to be yourself. You want to admit it to yourself. Sweden is actually a country that accepts gay people.
You were in the closet because you can't come out in Yemen.
Yeah, not to a single soul, because we have a death penalty for homosexuality.
Oh,
and then I moved to Sweden and realized that it was Yemen 2.0.
Sweden?
Well, not Yemen 2.0. Like, so I talk about the brainwashing that happens in Yemen, which is like an Islamic, radical Islam brainwashing. In Sweden, there's another kind of brainwashing, which is like this ultra Marxist, leftist, insane ideology that is oppressive, that excludes voices. So I usually say, and I say this a lot in Swedish, is like in Yemen, you get murdered for speaking, for talking about the things that you believe in. In Sweden, you get character murdered. So they murder your character. They call you a Nazi. They call you a racist. They call you a fascist. So when I do speak about these issues, for example, and say, in my country, I would get killed. And, in Sweden is not thinking about this migration policies properly. Like, you're a Nazi and you're a fascist and you're a racist. So the leftists, the crazy leftists, they try to murder my character and delegitimize the things that I talk about.
So you stayed in Sweden and sought asylum?
Yes, I did. And let me tell you, when I arrived to the refugee camp, it was in 2014, and I was there for 8 months, and I was still in the closet. So I did not come out. Everybody in the refugee camp, the vast majority were absolute religious maniacs. They would ask me, why aren't you fasting? You're a Muslim. You're going to go to hell. And I'm like, you're in Sweden. So it was a constant debate. And when the peak of it was when the Charlie Hebdo attack happened in 2015, they were celebrating. They were celebrating.
Where were most of the refugees there from? Syria?
They were from Syria, there were Palestinian, there were Iraqis, there were Somalis, and that's like the majority of them. But the majority were from Syria because that was like the peak of the migration crisis. And I remember just looking at that and thinking like, and then that was the moment I started learning Swedish. I'm like, so how are you going to integrate or like change this? You think like, how do you think you're superhuman people who have this like recipe that's going to be able to de-radicalize this? And then I actually learned, I became a journalist and a writer, and I understood that actually even the seculars and even the progressives come to Sweden and become radicalized.
Yeah.
Because they come to the society where it's so hard to learn the language, it's so hard to integrate, it's so hard to find friends. You end up isolated and feeling like hatred towards the society. I know many examples of people who came to Sweden with like clean minds. They're not fascist, they're not super anti-Semitic, they're not that. But then they end up in a society where they can't find themselves. And then you have two roads. There's the mosque, which is radical and filled with even so much more hatred than the mosques in Yemen. It's crazy.
Wow.
And then you have criminality, the gangs, because gangs in Sweden right now, Sweden went from being one of the safest countries in Europe, and now it's like being compared to Mexico.
Oh my God.
And they're shooting everywhere in Yemen.
And rape.
Well, same
It's a
thing in
huge
Yemen,
problem with
Sweden.
rape
Oh yeah.
as well.
And there's also more than 30% of Swedish women are scared of going out at night because they're
This was actually my experience when I visited Sweden. I started talking about Malmo to you before, but I wanted to go out for like a drink to meet my friend's friends when I was visiting there, and it was 6 p.m. and it had just gotten dark. And she's like, "Oh, we can't go outside."
Yeah.
I was like, "What do you mean we can't go outside?" And she says to me, "Well, you know, it's dark, so like we'll get raped."
And the
Like, as a matter of fact.
And the Swedes are just taking this lying back. They just decided not to fight it.
Yeah, I mean, they're anti-racist.
So tell us a little bit more about your activism. How did you get involved in this war after October 7th, which is when we've all kind of gotten to know you through social media? Tell us a little bit about that journey
Right.
of, you know, getting to know Israel or getting to appreciate Israel.
Right. So like the first time I met an Israeli in Sweden, I panicked. I had like a flight or fight mode. I was just like scared of the guy. I thought he was going to do bad things to me. It was just like a very frightening
What did
moment.
you, sorry, just to interject, what were your thoughts about Jews like growing up? Like, what were you raised to believe?
So in mosques, we like the first time I ever heard the word Jew or Zionist was in the mosque. And it was when the preacher preaches and he's like, "May God make us rich," and everybody's like, "Amen," and we just repeat after them, "May God make us, happy, Amen." May God, and I was like a child, I was like 7 or 8, and then "May God kill the Jews, Amen." And I remember this, "May God make them orphans," and I remember as a child, orphans. Why would you make?
Why would you want someone to be a?
And that was like the first experience, and I internalized the anti-Semitism and also like the Holocaust. We never learn anything about it, and if we hear anything, it should have been. It should have happened. It's Jewish.
Or it didn't happen, or they should have gone all the way. Those are the two.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had internalized all of that, and even when I moved to Sweden, I'm like, I don't hate Jews. Like it's just like I internalized homophobia, but now like I was even homophobic when I first, even though as homosexual myself. But then when I first met this Israeli guy, I realized, oh my God, I am anti-Semitic. I hate Jewish people. And through my friendship with this guy, because like he told me, like when I first met him, when he told me he's Israeli, like I literally blurred. I'm like, I had a flat, I just like panicked, and I didn't hear anything else he was saying. I was just like staring at him. And then when I went back to reality and my brain started functioning, he was telling me about Yemeni bread and that he's going to make me Yemeni bread and he knows a lot of Yemeni people. And I'm like, okay, but I didn't believe him. Like, this guy is lying. It's just like a facade. He's trying to get my trust so that he can, like, do something bad to me. That was, like, my internal. And then a few months later, he's, like, the closest friend to me in this city.
He came with the bread.
He came with the Yemeni bread.
Kubane.
Yeah, and he was just the sweetest guy. And I just, like, he opened my mind. And then I became a journalist, started working. Also, I had Jewish coworkers who were my favorite coworkers. And still, even throughout that time, Israel was never on the map for me. Like it was always like, oh, of course, Israel is doing bad things. Israel, then they took over the country and stuff like that. And that's when I went into full mode because when October 7th happened and I saw the footage online, it kind of like, it brought out everything out. Like it brought out all the anti-Semitism and self-hatred because I usually say wherever there are slaughterhouses for Jews, they're also created for the gays.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened, when October 7th happened, and I saw what happened, I was so shocked to the core. And then, like, I remember, like, all the hatred toward kill the Jews, kill Israel, destroy. And I'm like, it's happening in front of me. And then people started celebrating it in Malmo, in London, in New York. And seeing the reaction and the aftermath that how social media has been happening, like kill all the Jews trending on X, I was so angry and so scared, not just for the Jews, but for myself as well. Like, who's going to stand up for us, So I had to do it. I had to speak out against anti-Semitism and just speak out strongly against it. And I've lost so many people. My best friend blocked me. He accepts me for being gay, but not. My brother blocked me.
Not for being friendly to Jews.
Exactly. Zionism to them is like terrorism. And even friends that many of my Arab friends now call me a terrorist. And now, like, I do a lot of content. I write for different Swedish newspapers, but mainly I do work for Builders of the Middle East. And Builders of the Middle East is an organization, it's not an organization, it's a community actually, and it's sent from heaven because it's like Arabs, Jews, Palestinians, Israelis, atheists, Muslims, right wing, left wing, does not matter. We only have one goal, and that goal is to fight extremism and fight for peace, and above all, humanize the people. So
that's amazing. Are there real people there, like from the Muslim Palestinian side?
Yeah.
Real peace activists?
real
And also you bring so many, like you did a video about the Kurds, and you did a video about all these different groups from the Middle East who have been ethnically cleansed, who have been Arabized or Islamized throughout history. So it's really, really nice because you're finally seeing something positive from the Middle East.
Right.
Such a nice.
So, yeah.
And we also tell stories. So it's a lot of storytelling. We tell stories from Gaza of people who are trying to bring peace. We're telling stories from Palestinian peace activists who are trying to abridge their communities. And that is such important work because while everything is happening right now, we have to think about the future.
100%.
And, you know, like Palestinians and Israelis are always going to be there. And at the end of the road, they need to coexist, no matter what is happening right now. And we need to remind ourselves of the humanity.
So the question for me is, and this Builders of the Middle East sounds like an awesome project, how do we de-radicalize? How do we de-radicalize? I mean, you're talking about Europe. We're right here in the region, right here in this country, right here in the different Palestinian autonomous territories. How do you de-radicalize?
Schools and mosques. We go right into them. Like, I've had discussions about this. I'm like, wow, like, you sound like a dictator. Well, like, if it's not dictatorship, if you're trying to actually cleanse out a cancer, what is happening right now and the suffering that is happening is because of that hatred. And we need to go to the root cause. And like, even with the Israeli government right now, it's like you're trying to eradicate the Hamas soldiers. Fine, go ahead. But you know, what's worse than that is the Hamas ideology. And you do not eradicate the Hamas ideology by bombing them, actually. You do it through their roots. You grab their roots and you take it out. So how do you eradicate that cancer completely? And it doesn't happen by bombs. It happens by actually going to the institutions. And Sweden right now, for example, is financing Palestine, right? They're sending a lot of money there. And I translated some of the books, the school books that are being sent there, and it's all about rockets and you know, genocide. Yeah. And it's like we are helping the radicalization instead of the de-radicalization.
That's what people don't understand, that UNRWA, something that I've been talking about for a long time, which is the network of school systems, they have the Palestinian Authority school book, which is all about hatred and Jew hatred and Israel doesn't exist. And I do agree with you that I think the UAE, who have de-radicalized their curriculum, Saudi also, could be a very, very good example to come here and lead that change. Loai, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show, and keep doing what you're doing. You're doing it with such great nature, sense of humor. You're a one of a kind. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.